Hi, this is Chris Haughey. Welcome back to my studio, Create with Chris. Today we're brewing up something sweet and spooky with this Boo Brew mug plaque. This is so much fun. I had a great time creating and designing it, and I'm sure you're going to love it too. A happy pumpkin, colorful candy, just the right touch of spooky charm. Going to be showing you some unique techniques and unusual tricks that are going to make this project easy to paint and seriously impressive, no matter what your skill level. So whether you're a beginner or an experienced decorative painter, this one is bursting with tips to spark your creativity. So grab your brushes, pour a cup of your favorite brew, and let's get painting. This is an MDF wood surface, so I did seal it with multi-purpose sealer, let it dry and lightly sanded it. I always say that provides a silky smooth surface, easy on the brushes, and it makes the paint glide on quicker and smoother. I'm loading my 3/4 inch oval wash. It's lightly dampened so that the paint will slide on smoothly. I'm applying the paint in a vertical kind of stroke that replicates the sectioning of the pumpkins. Want to make sure that I keep these strokes going in the same direction. It just makes it easier. Sometimes I can get away with just one base coat depending on what I'm base coating, but even if it's not solid and opaque, it still gives that appearance of sectioning of the pumpkins. I want to make sure that I cover the entire surface smoothly and evenly. If your brush is dragging, just pick up a little bit more moisture. Make sure that you have those continuous strokes. And don't let the paint dry in one section before you connect it. I always start in the middle and kind of bring the paint toward the outer edges. That helps keep the outer edges clean. And by the middle, I don't mean like the middle, but I don't start on the side edges. Even on the handle, kind of just push it toward that outer edge. And I'm following the contour of the handle just to make sure that that paint is nice and smooth and even. Want to make sure that I don't leave any empty spots. May need a second coat. You can always tell after it's dry. Now that it is dry, I have loaded my 1/2 inch awesome angle with heritage brick, just starting to build in those darker shadowing. I've loaded the toe of my brush, slightly dampened, and I want to make sure that I have nice long fluid strokes. Plenty of paint on the brush, but I want to be able to move it around, and you can see how quickly and how far one loaded brush will take me. I went clear down the side. It's still wet. I can still move it around, soften it, dampen it, walk it out. It just makes adding the shading much quicker, much easier, and I think in the long run it really provides a lot of continuity. Need to decide where those section ridges are, and I'm just going to slide that shading right down one side, and then I'll flip it over. It's easier for me to pull it towards me, so I flip it over and I can have that same float just on both sides of that section valley, and just soften it out. Do the same thing on the other side. I do have the candy traced on there, so I know exactly where to start and stop that shading. And I'm not afraid to pull it down into the candy, because I know in past experience, sometimes you don't have the painted areas bumped up tight enough, and you always end up with what I call an empty spot. So this will just eliminate any possibility of having any voids where two different objects connect. So I just bring it right down into that candy. I allow it to shade above the candy just a little bit. And I'm just using the clean part of my brush to soften that out. And I can really paint quite a distance before I have to really reload. And you can see by the reflection how wet and movable that paint is. So it allows me time to really work with it. Just going to continue that shading around the candy. I'm going to go around that candy at the base of the handle. My shading is from the top and the left, so I want to shade the right side and also against the brim and on the underneath of the handle. I can always go back and touch up any shaded areas that need just a little more strength added to them. I'm loading my diverse dry brush. This is a number 12 with fresh mango. Wipe the excess on a paper towel. I'm just going to dry brush a highlight down the handle. These brushes are amazing. I'll use those for almost everything in this project, but it makes it so easy to add a soft highlight, and it just takes a little bit of time. Each little scrub or brush is going to add a little more paint on the surface, and I'll go over it until I'm happy. The brush needs to be dry. It cannot be overloaded. It just builds up intensity all on its own. It's almost kind of magical, but look what a difference that little bit of highlight creates on that handle. Going to add the same highlight on the outer sections of the pumpkin. Taking the same brush, loading it with fresh mango, and just dry brush it. I had a little too much paint on the brush and it came across dark, but I decided to leave it because I liked the way that looked. I did add a hint of dry brushing right on the forehead between the eyes too. This is the candy corn, and I'm going to paint the top section white and just pull it down. I'm using my number 8 Fantastic Filbert. It just fits the tip of that candy corn perfectly. I know where those little rounded candies are in front, but I'm painting a little bit past them so that when I go to add those rounded candies, they will definitely cover up and I have that voided area. Always try to keep my strokes nice and long and fluid. That eliminates so much, especially with the lighter colors like white or soft yellow, orange. It eliminates a lot of extra top coating. Sometimes they're not as opaque as you would like them to be. So if the stroke work is consistent and covers evenly, it may only take a couple coats instead of 3 or 4. Base coat the licorice candy in the left corner with soft black. Loaded my 18-aught Epic script liner and just kind of did a little swirl inside the candy. Now I'm going back with Baby Duck. I'm adding the yellow stripe and the orange stripe. I'm painting both of them because I have that white undercoat. It's just super easy to lay that on there nice and smooth. Top coating that middle section with Warm Sunset, and I'm starting on the left side. That's my shaded side, and I'm just pulling it over, letting it become a little bit lighter on the right side. Just kind of creates that natural highlight, and I love the way that turned out. I didn't have to go back and do a whole lot of enhancing. It was a little stripy, so I just touched it with my mop brush. Always keep a mop brush handy just in case. And I cleaned up that yellow where it met with the orange. Going to enhance that shading on the left side with a little bit of Heritage Brick. I started out doing the shading on the white with light cinnamon, but I switched over to soft black. It just looked a little, with the color palette used, soft black worked out better. Picked up a little bit of Snow White on the toe of my angle, and I'm just going to float around the outer edge and the little wrapped twisty part on the wrapper. And it's kind of hard because it's tucked underneath the candy corn, but I just keep the toe of it with a little bit of paint on it. This is a 1/4 inch angle, a little easier here to see. I'm starting at the bottom, just pulling it up and letting it float out. And it's going to take several applications of paint to create this wrapper. It's really super simple. It doesn't require a lot of fussiness. I'm just letting the brush float on these transparent layers of cellophane. Afterwards, I'm taking my Epic script liner with Snow White, just going to crisp up those edges and really add strength to those folds. Go right around there, pull some of those folds down into the candy, and you can see now why I didn't spend a lot of time on the candy itself. It's really not that visible. I'm going to let that dry for a while and go to the rounded candies. So whenever I can use a stencil to create a rounded shape, definitely it's one of my very best painting tools. Using purple iris, the round candy was purple cow. This is purple iris to do a little bit of shading. I want that light, it's kind of from the top down, so the bottom and the outer side will be just a little more shaded. I picked up a touch of wisteria to highlight it with. If you want to, you can just lighten that purple cow with a little bit of white just to bring some brightness in. And I'm not really spending a lot of time on that. I'm going back with a little bit of aqua sky to enhance the wrapper, and this is just going to bring a little bit of coolness into that shaded area inside where it folds over on the twist end and at the base of the twist. I want to put just a hint of that aqua sky on the shading on the purple candy. It just looks fabulous. And a tiny bit on the candy corn. This I bumped down to my Bubble Buddy, which is a part of my set of painter's tools. There's just all kinds of shapes. Again, round is not my friend, so I use these to make me look good. Picking up some warm sunset, or fresh mango, to shade around the round candies on the candy corn. I thought it would be easier to do that after I knew exact candy placement, and I wanted to just bring that all the way down. This is plantation pine. Just going to shade that bottom and give a little depth to that. Picked up a touch of celery shoot to highlight that. All of the round candies are painted the same. You have your base, middle color, highlight with a lighter color, shade with a darker color. Just a little bit of black plum just to deepen that corner over where the wrapper is. Picked up a little bit of soft black just to create a little bit of shadowing. Because this is tucked in a little tiny corner, just a little touch of paint's going to make a big difference. But look how that pushes that back in the background. Going back now with Snow White just to enhance that wrapper, make it look a little more wrinkled. I'm painting the round candy behind the candy corn, and I didn't want to get it on the candy corn, so I'm using one of my painter's tools, just kind of lay it over that circle stencil, and it's going to automatically create that edge so that my candy corn is in front of the round. And this one is the black and orange Pinwheel candy. Just going to go in. I kind of started with fresh mango to highlight, and then I picked up a little bit of warm sunset. The reason I did that, I didn't want it to blend into the pumpkin background, so it's about contrast. Spa blue to highlight the blue. Always pay attention to what's in front and what's behind to create that contrast. This is Stormy, a beautiful deep rich blue color for shading. And that dimension just really starts to build up. Wanted to keep that shadowing behind that round, or behind that candy corn. Using my 18-aught Epic script liner to create the stripe sections on the black and orange Pinwheel candy. And for me it was easier to use that smaller brush just so I could maintain a lot of control. And I have a fair bit of moisture. It's not a solid black line. I can go back now with my number 2 radical round. Now that I have that in, it's kind of in a little tight area. I just dropped down to a smaller brush. Now that I don't have all that tight area, I can stick with that number 2 radical round just to build that in there. And pay attention, you don't really need it to be solid black. Adding just a tiny bit of white to highlight that outer edge. Again, it's all about contrast. Popping a little bit of that fresh mango in there just to highlight that so it stands out a little bit more. I don't want it to get too dark. It's these little touches that not necessarily are difficult. They don't take a lot of time. It's just a little pop of color here, a little pop of color there. Using my smaller dry brush to put a little bit of a white highlight on kind of around the middle of that. I love the dry brushes. Look what a difference that makes. Now I can go in and start adding the rounded candies. I thought at this point I should have painted the candy corn first, but I didn't. So I just kind of got excited about adding more candy. I was kind of excited to get across the front of it. Decide how to lay them out. And you can change up the colors, whatever you want. But it was probably good I didn't paint the candy corn because I changed the placement of the rounded candies, and now I'm just adding a snow white highlight. I just picked up a tiny bit of black plum, thinned it down. I want it to be transparent. I'm painting a shadow between the candies. It just really helps to separate them, give a little bit of dimension. Helps them create that contrast. Decided to jump over to this candy on the other side. I am taking my radical round, just painting a black border, trying to remember all the candy I had when I was a kid. Loved licorice. This little section of the plaque is not quite round, so it was a little challenge to paint just paint an even border around it. This actually, when I first painted it, is a snowman, so I just adapted the shape. I kind of thought it would be fun to do a Halloween design on it. Put a little bit of fresh mango in the center, kind of patting it out, keeping it bright in the center. Painting now the long wrapped candy with purple cow. I kind of jump around because I get bored and I don't want to wait for the paint to dry, so I think the base coating probably takes the most time. So if I can knock the base coating out, then when I go back I can just add the fun part. This is my Halloween helper, and it had a cute little spider on it, so I thought that would be really fun to add in the middle of this candy. I wasn't sure when I first did it, but after it was finished I thought it really worked out well. Adding some warm sunset over top of that yellow to add the middle section on the candy corn. Very thin paint. I can always go back and deepen it, trying to keep it smooth and even. I'm using an angle because I like that toe. I like to be able to get in those corners very easily. And I decided to go ahead and finish both of the candy corns, which this is fresh mango. I just want to add a little bit of dimension shading in the yellow part. Love this color. This is one of the newer colors. It's just beautiful. It adds that hint of orange without being overpowering. Wanted to add polka dots or candy dots on the candy, and I'm using my painter's pal and stenciling the big candy circles with foliage green, and I just kind of staggered them around. Now I'm going in with purple iris to shade the bottom of the candy and a little bit up the sides. Now I'm just placing a smaller circle in the center of those candy dots and using baby duck. It's so much fun to create candy. I can create whatever flavors I want. I just think this is a really fun candy. Now I'm adding the wrapper on this candy on the end, and you can probably see this one a little bit easier because of the contrast of the black. Just floating it around the outer edge and pulling down those folds. Don't try to rush it. Let it just kind of create on its own. Let each layer dry before you add more. If you're not sure, stop and let it dry, and then you can go back and really work with it. My paint is very loose and very movable, so I can play around with it a little bit and just just create that fun little twist at the end, kind of fan it out and pull it toward those gathers. And I'm using the toe of it to create those lines. I think this is very magical to watch this build up and create that look of cellophane wrapped. It's a little bit of a challenge behind the candy corn, but then I decided that would be, a lot of it would be in the shadowing, so it was okay. Didn't have to be perfect. So I just kind of floated it on there and then used the toe of it to pull it up and over. And it looks a little bit weak, but by the time all of the extra line work is added, it's just so cool. Same thing on the rounded candy. I gave it time to dry. Going to go around the outer edge with that float of soft or Snow White. And I want to make sure to do not only the sides and the top, but also across the bottom. And don't worry about perfection because this is just wrapped. So every wrapped candy is different. The ends will be different. And you can see how long that takes to do that little wrapped twist at the end. It might look difficult, but don't let it become a challenge. Now the one on the candy corn over the yellow is not going to show up as well, so that one will just require a little more shading to create that contrast. And I'm just doing a little bit of a float over that one on the end. Loaded my Epic script liner with Snow White, and I'm just going to outline the outer edges and then define those little folds there at the twist. And slow down on this so that you have good control and you can see what you're doing. Always pull it from the twist part out and down. Let them stagger. Don't let them be the same perfect. It just adds a little more interest when it's not so perfect. The paint needs to be very thin, and as it dries it will not be quite as strong as it appears on camera right now. I don't want to really mute that spider so that you can't see him, because I thought he was really cute, if a spider can be cute, but I wanted definitely to look like that cellophane went over top of it. Same thing on the little wrap candy. Even though it's not going to show up too much on that yellow, still going to do the same technique. And see how I can outline that? Pull those little folds down. My paint is very wet, and so I can have nice long strokes. If you're not able to get those nice long fluid strokes, add a little moisture to the brush. And remember, more can always be added. Okay, this is where I picked up just a hint of black plum. Not only is this going to be the shadowing behind the candy where it's overlapping the candy corn, but it's also going to help define that wrapped in. And I put a little shadow to the right of the candy corn on that wrapped candy. And this is so transparent. It's a shadow, so all shadows are transparent. Went back to my 1/4 inch angle. I'm just tucking a little bit of that black plum inside that wrapper fold and at the base where it's going to be crinkled up just a little bit. See how I can really define that? Look how that wrapper now against that yellow really stands out. Don't let it get too dark. Put just a little bit where it crinkles on both sides of that twist. And I'm putting just a little bit across the bottom just to make it look like a shadow down there. Now that I've added that shading, I can go back and reinforce those outlines, and it really makes that pop. And it pushes that shading in the back. See how that adds? So it's not difficult. It just, a couple layers of paint really makes it stand out. Adding a purple cow little round candy in the corner, and that will be painted the same as the other purple candy. Shade it with a little bit of purple iris. Highlight it with a little bit of wisteria. Again, I use a lot of moisture on my brush, so it's really easy to move that paint around. Going to add a foliage green candy, shade it with plantation pine, and highlight it with celery shoot. And I want to make sure that these stand out well. So I want my darks to be really dark and my highlights to be bright. Adding a hint of aqua sky, and this doesn't look like a hint, but it's very thin and very transparent, and it's just going to add coolness to some of those shaded areas. There's my little shading to make that little green one pop out, and I'm just going back with a little bit of aqua sky on that wrapper. What a huge difference that little bit of color makes. I'm never sure, and then I put it on, I think, yeah, this is what it definitely needed. Okay, so the candy is finished. Just play around with those wrappers until you have the right strength of shading and highlighting and a little bit of line work on it. It's just perfect. I wanted the eye area to be very translucent, so I've taken black plum, and again I'm using my stencils because they make it perfect. I loaded my spectacular stencil brush with black plum, and I'm just doing, it's almost a dry brush, very, very light dry brush, and it just gives that hint of darkness. I love the result of that. I didn't have a triangle stencil, however, I'm better at straight lines than circles, so I'm just thinning the paint down super thin, going around and creating the outer edge of the nose and just pulling that paint down, and I'm just going to softly blend it in and keep those edges nice and clean. Using my number 12 diverse dry brush and heritage brick, I thought he ought to have, it's just a little bit of a rosy cheek. I'm not sure it even shows up that much, but I thought I would play around with it, and I kind of like the way it looked. Load the brush, wipe off the excess, and then very gently, very, very gently, just kind of, I do a circle, an X, and I kind of just build it up softly. I think sometimes on a plaque like this, a little more subtle detail just adds a little more interest. Just let it blend out softly. Loaded my Epic script liner with soft black. Just going to paint the mouth. Paint is very thin. I want to be able to have a nice long fluid stroke. You know, when the brush is loaded correctly, you can just kind of go for a mile. That's what I'm trying to get here. Taking a little bit of heritage brick, just floating it underneath the mouth. That's going to help place the mouth, not only give a little bit of dimension, but it also kind of helps to enhance it and make it stand out just a little bit more. Makes it look like it's cut into the face instead of just painted on the outside. Taking that same little bit of black plum, I want to create a little bit of edging on the outer side of the eye. So I'm just floating that around. Just helps to bring those facial features, instead of looking like they're painted on, like they fit into the pumpkin. Adding just a little bit of shading, I think, always makes a big difference. Across the bottom of the nose and up the right side. Taking just a little bit of fresh mango on my number 5 radical round. I want to create the sides of the cutout eye area. Really adds nice dimension there. And fresh mango is just perfect for the inside pumpkin color. The radical round has a nice sharp point, so I can start out with a little sharp point, press it down. It has a nice fat belly, holds quite a bit of paint, so I can just have a nice fluid stroke and then lift up on that point. I love a brush that is versatile. I'm going to pull a little edge down the side of the nose long fluid stroke. To do the eyeball, the iris, go back to my stencil, and then I use my painter's pal to kind of mask so I don't paint over that side of the eye. Foliage green, just going to stencil that in there. Nice solid opaque coverage. If it requires 2 coats, take a look at it. After it dries, put a second coat on if it is needed. I like the eyes to be just a little bit off center, so I can mask that off. It looks like he's kind of peeking out instead of, if they're right directly in the center, it looks a little bug-eyed. After I load my stencil brush, I always tap it on a paper towel a couple times to remove excess paint. Otherwise, it may end up not having those clean, crisp edges. Going back with a little bit of black plum just to deepen the shadowing below the brim on the right side. Just adding a little more depth, a little more intensity. If you paint with me very often, you know I love deep, rich colors. This is plantation pine. I'm just going to float it along the top and down the left side. This is my 3/8 inch awesome angle. If you're not familiar with my brushes, they just have extra length to them, and you can see how long I can paint before I have to reload. It's just such an asset to be able to not spend my time, you know, you get your brush loaded just perfectly and then you run out of paint and have to load it again. You're going, and then you have to match it up and try to get it to blend. If you have a brush that you can load and paint a mile with, it's so much easier. I switched over to celery shoot, and I can do both eyes with one float very, very easily. A celery shoot is such a beautiful color. Really brings a pop of brightness. Really looks like it's lit up. Just centering my bubble buddy in the middle of the iris, and I'm stenciling those pupils soft black. Whoa, what a difference. And what's nice about the stencils, and I'm sure you're aware, they're transparent so you can see through it. It's great for placement. I can tell exactly where the center is. Lift it straight up so it doesn't smear. After it dries, I take just a hint of aqua sky on the toe of my 1/4 inch angle, and I want to float it along the bottom and up the right side of each pupil. It brings a little bit of soft color into that dark pupil, warms his eye up. Even though it's a cool color, it just gives him a little bit of personality. I love the way that looks. In fact, I love it so much that I thought it would be really nice. Green and blue are great friends. Just a hint of that aqua sky in that celery shoot. And look what that does. It just turns it kind of a teal. It's not going to mute that brightness. It just brings a little more continuity. I've kind of bounced aqua sky all across the candy, and now I can bring it into his eyes. Loaded my script liner with a little bit of Snow White. I'm pulling a comma stroke across the iris. And then I'm going to add a couple little dip dots in the pupil. And look at those little eyes sparkle. I want to tone down the top and the bottom, probably about 1/3 of the area there around his eye. And I'm just using a little bit of heritage brick just to kind of shadow that down, blend it in. I want that middle area to be a bit brighter. This will also help pull the attention to the eyes. Going back with a little bit of baby duck just to brighten that up right beside his eyes. Look how it's going to pull the vision right in there. Add a little bit on the nose, just in that middle part. So I start midair, kind of swoop in, drag the brush and lift it up. So that middle area is the only one that's getting hit hard with the paint. Add his little eyebrows. I thought it would look good with a little bit of soft black shading right over top his eyes because they are sort of behind there. So be careful, don't get it on the white highlights, but just kind of swoop that in. I just turn my brush and it just pushes those eyes back in there. A little bit of heritage brick below the eyebrows. Again, that helps to fit them into his face. I am stenciling the spider with soft black. Again, I'm using my oval stencil. You can just as easily paint it. I struggle with that, so I always use a stencil. And these basic stencils are just so handy to have on hand. Adding just a teeny tiny bit of Snow White in the mouth. I thought it would just kind of help make it sparkle a little bit. And I didn't do a solid line, I just kind of did a little bit here and a little bit there. Picked up some fresh mango to line that outer edge of the eye. All these little details, and it's not a big deal. Does it really need it? Not really, but look what a difference it makes. It just really brightens it up. Because I put aqua sky on everything else, I had to bring a little bit into the spider, and it looks bright, but when it dries it tones down considerably. Just picked up a little bit of Snow White on my small diverse dry brush. It's number 2, just to highlight the top kind of left. I thought the top of his mouth would look a little better with a bit of a float, so I put a little fresh mango just to kind of pop out that upper lip. And I'm using a 1/4 inch angle. I kind of struggled with this. I should have bumped it up to a 3/8 because I had to reload often. And if I had a bigger brush, I could have probably floated across there. But you know, you get a brush loaded and you think, I'll just finish it. So it just took a little bit longer. I love using a chalk pencil, and I'm just going to put where his eyes and nose go, because once I put that stencil on there, I want to know exact placement. So I just center that little dot, stencil the eyeball Snow White, I bumped down to a number 3 spectacular stencil. Just makes it super easy to find placement. I know they're going to be in the right place, and I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, just a very light tap. It will take 2 coats with the eyes. I used my stylus and warm sunset just to kind of dip dot an oval nose. Loaded my epic script liner with Snow White to paint the mouth and the teeth. To do the teeth, I always pull a line straight down, and then I build the sides of it. So I do straight down, and then I kind of pull angle-wise, and that way I know they're pretty similar. A little bit of black plum. I want to have I don't want those stark white eyeballs, so I'm floating a little bit of black plum across the top left of the eyeballs just to kind of shade them down a little bit. Gives a hint of color, and they don't look quite so strongly white. And then a hint across the base of the teeth. I'm dip dotting the pupils with soft black, using the handle end of my brush. Go straight in, lift straight up. I love my chalk pencil. This is what I use for all my test drawing. It dissolves with water, so I don't have to worry too much about trying to erase all these little lines. If I do need to erase them, they come off very, very easily. And it doesn't dig into the paint. It is chalk, so it comes off very quickly. I used it for the legs. I used it for the little hanging line. Loaded my epic script liner with soft black, just pulling down that little hanging thread. And then I'll line all of his legs with soft black as well. And just because I have the chalk pencil lines there, some of these I kind of changed my mind on placement. So that's one thing nice about the chalk pencil. I don't have to worry about removing it because I changed my mind when I was stroking on the paint. It's just a great tool to have in your toolkit, adding a little sparkle in those eyes. This I call it the sparkle of life. It always adds such a huge difference to have that little bit of sparkle on there. And his legs needed a little bit of highlight, and it looks a little confusing with that white chalk pencil underneath. But basically what I did, I just added a little bit of snow white highlight on the top and on the left side of the legs. Taking soft black and just going to line the spider web. Keep that brush loaded well. You should be able to go the whole length of this line without reloading. If not, you don't have enough moisture on your brush. To add these little horizontal threads, it's just kind of fun. They don't have to be all the same. I kind of like doing little bits of different things, kind of staggering the way they're spaced, putting some of them together. Irregularity is a little more interesting, so I just kind of have fun and create irregular little threads across there. Took just a little bit of snow white, and I just want to highlight the middle of each of those horizontal threads, and it's just touch, 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 touch. I think this is another, I hate to keep saying this, a little bit of paint makes a big difference, but wow. I mean, this is, to me, this is huge. The spider web looked kind of dull and boring until I added the white on there. And you can see how quickly I can just pop that in there. And then I thought, well, maybe we need just a little bit down those radial threads. And yep, that kind of made a difference on that as well. It's amazing how dimensional that becomes with just that little touch of white. Adding the drop shadow below and to the right of the spider body, his legs, give that little pop of dimension. Kind of have to think about where the shadowing lies. It's below and to the right. Make sure that paint is nice and transparent. This is a shadow, so it needs to be very soft and subtle. And then I decided I wanted to put a drop shadow behind the spider web as well. And yes, it would have been easier to do this before the white, but it ended up not being a big deal because the shadowing is not over any of the white part. So it's just a little bit to the right of those radial lines and then below those horizontal ones. And I thought the white made a big difference, but after adding the drop shadow, really ramps it up quite a bit. And it's always these little touches. People don't really notice, but it adds that wow factor, and they just know it looks really good. Painting the top brim, I'm just using soft black to paint that and my oval wash. Want to give it a good solid coverage. Loaded my number 10 flat shader with soft black to paint the stripes on the handle, and I let it the paint kind of filter out as I started on the inside, and as I went around it became a little bit lighter. If you are not a fan of painting lettering, you're gonna love this technique. This was so much fun. I had a blast doing it. It was so super easy. I have loaded my 18-aught Epic script liner with Baby Duck, and I am just doing little short choppy strokes, and they're jaggedy and they're uneven and they look fantastic. Watch how I do the O. Just gotta pull it across. Short. Okay, and then on the down section, just going to pull it across, let it be jaggedy, let it be raggedy. On the down section, I'm just going to pull it down. Pull it down. Don't worry about it being uneven or solid. You just want that coverage. And each section of the lettering has about 3 or 4 strokes. and let it be jaggedy. This turned out super cool. Nothing is rounded or smooth. Now I wanted to go from yellow into that fresh mango and then end up in that warm sunset. And I want to have an area of each letter that can be blended together. So as I'm doing this baby duck, I'm pulling it down just a little bit further than I would say I'm almost doing the top half of the letters. And just kind of, whatever you do is going to be fine on these. And you'll see, as I started out, I was a little bit unsure of myself. And as I go further with the lettering, applying the paint and deciding this is pretty cool, you can see I gain a little more confidence. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I thought about painting perfect letters, and I thought I didn't want to go there, so I thought I would try this. If it didn't work, I would just paint over it and do something different. Now I have picked up fresh mango, and I'm going in the middle, kind of painting up into that baby duck and pulling it down into where that warm sunset's going to be at the bottom. So this is going to be my middle blend on the ombre. It was hard for me to keep this minimal because I wanted to paint it heavier and more solid. So keep that in mind as you paint this. It just needs to be a few strokes. Always in your mind think to yourself, I can always go back and add more. And in this particular case, you can go back and touch it up with the soft black, but it was so easy that you really don't need to. But already, doesn't that look cool already? I mean, it just looks very Halloweenish. I'm going to do these letters again. I had so much fun doing them. In my mind, I'm thinking I need to pull it down a little bit past that bottom third so I can blend that warm sunset up into it. So we have the baby duck on the top, and then this mango, fresh mango in the middle, and then it's going to go down into that warm sunset. I think you can do this with any set of 3 colors, would look fantastic. It works better for me to pull it towards myself, and I'm just using these short, kind of choppy strokes. So as I do the bottom, I just flipped it upside down so I could pull it towards me and create the rest of the lettering. And this is the warm sunset. Oh my gosh, this is the coolest lettering you will ever do. And the easiest probably, because if it's perfect and you spend too much time with it, it's going to lose its radical Halloween effect. I know if you try this, you're going to absolutely love it, and you're going to say, oh, I could do it for so many other different lettering applications. I really enjoyed being able to paint the letters without the stress of making them look perfect. And I thought about creating a stencil, which would be fine, but I would have had to wait. I wanted to get them finished, and I just thought maybe I would try something totally different, and I am so glad I did. So always, if you're working on something and you're not sure and you think, I wonder if, go ahead and give it a try, because you never know, it might turn out really awesome. If you're enjoying this video, let me know. Let me know what you think about this lettering. I'd love to hear from you. If you give it a try, be sure to send me a picture in the comments below. I love to see what you guys do, and let me know what you're up to. Keep that paint fluid so you can really play with it and kind of blend it into those other colors. Now I'm going back with just a little bit of fresh mango. I told you I was a little bit conservative when I first did this, but now that I've done it and I'm thinking, yeah, I really worked out well, I can go back and just kind of fortify some of, especially that fresh mango color, because I was kind of careful about adding those colors in and just going back and bumping that up a little bit. I didn't fill them in, I'm just adding more stroke work. And you can see where the letters need to be a little bit stronger. Love how this turned out. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And that wraps up our Boo Brew mug plaque. I love how this turned out, and I hope you picked up a few tips, tricks, and techniques to make your painting life a little easier and a whole lot more fun. All the supplies I used are listed in the links below. Be sure to check that out. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Hit the bell, subscribe. Be sure to share it with your painting friends. That way you won't miss out on upcoming tutorials. I'd love to hear from you, so drop a comment or question below. And if you paint this project, I would love to see it. Be sure to share your results. Thank you so much for joining me today. I can't wait for our next painting adventure together. And remember, a little bit of paint makes a big difference.